If you find that you can't afford to put any money away toward this emergency fund, that's another sign that maybe you need to re-examine your expenses and see where you can cut back. I mean, if you do things like buy $4 or $5 frappuccinos several times a week, or buy a soda or even water bottles from the deli instead of filling up your water bottles at home, or if you buy magazines on a newsstand just because a headline of an article caught your eye, even though you could probably find that article online for free, consider that even trivial $5 a day expenses, well, that adds up to $150 a month or $1,800 a year. And if you could just eliminate those trivial expenses and redirect that $5 a day toward an account earning just 3% interest, well, over 5 years, that'll add up to close to $10,000. Now, another thing I want to add about this emergency fund is that it should be in something safe, something the equivalent of a bank savings account or a money market account or maybe a series of short-term CDs. There are several options on where to store this type of fund, but I won't go into details. This video is just about looking at the high-level overview. All right, but I do want to make the point that you don't want this fund to be in the stock market because this fund is for emergencies. Again, things like being a cushion to rely on if you lose your job and you can't find a new one for several months or longer. So your emergency fund, it just shouldn't be in anything that carries a risk of losing value. Or now, once you've reached levels 1 through 3, then you're ready for level 4, which is about investing for large future expenses, such as a child's college tuition or your retirement. And when it comes to saving for this kind of level, you should consider the stock market, individual stocks and mutual funds, at least if you have enough time to reach your goals. Again, I won't go into any details, especially about investing in stocks, because I just want to keep this high level as possible. Now, I mentioned that in the last video, the general guideline is that these 4 levels should be achieved in order. For example, you should probably focus on paying off your debts, which is level 2, before you start building your emergency fund, which is level 3. And this is because your emergency fund will probably be earning fairly low interest, whereas with your debts, you're very likely to be paying high interest. So you don't want to be saving at an interest rate possibly as low as 2%, while you're paying interest rate as high as 20%. Your money is better off used getting rid of debt first before you build that emergency fund. As I also mentioned a minute earlier, you shouldn't focus too much on investing in things like stocks for your retirement, which is level 4, before you have your level 3, that is your emergency fund in place. And this is because, again, if emergency strikes, you don't want to be forced into pulling money out of stocks. You don't want to be forced to sell stocks suddenly, because stocks are not about immediate money making. The market fluctuates, so this is why stocks should never be counted on in times of emergency. You might have to sell when stocks are low, meaning you could take a financial loss. This is why your backup fund, equal to about 6 months of living expenses, should be built up first and stored in some place that's of minimal risk. Now, I'm saying words like usually and probably a lot because the rules here are not absolute. There are lots of exceptions based on personal circumstances, and all I can offer is a generic guideline. To give one example of an exception, if you work for a company that offers a 401k retirement plan in which the company matches a percentage of your contribution, well, that's like a pay raise that, at least in most cases, probably should not be turned down. So even if you're still struggling with levels 1, 2, and 3, you should probably at least consider making contributions to this level 4 concern, at least enough to get the maximum amount of free money from your company. Now, in my book, I go into more details than I do in this video, particularly about saving for long-term goals and how interest compounds over the years and how small contributions add up to large amounts after decades of investing, and why it's important to include stocks when it comes to long-term goals like your retirement. But this type of no-frills video is not the best vehicle for giving that type of advice or that type of information. And when it comes to specific investment advice, my book's not a source for that either. My main intention is just to introduce the subject, introduce the importance of the subject, especially for people who are just starting to live independently or preparing for independence. So for those of you who fit that category and you're looking at your paycheck and you want to know if you can afford that 160 gigabyte iPod, my advice is that to see if you can really afford it, first make sure that you have a budget in place so that you know you're setting enough aside to pay for all your monthly and your yearly expenses. And if you have debt, make sure you're setting enough of your paycheck aside to be debt-free in a reasonable amount of time. And if you're already debt-free, make sure you either already have that reserve fund in place, or if you don't, you're contributing enough money from every paycheck so that your reserve fund will eventually add up to that adequate amount. And if you already have your reserve fund in place, you should make sure you're having at least some money automatically deducted from your paycheck to be put toward large future expenses, things like your retirement or maybe a down payment on a house. And if all that is in place and you still have enough left over to get that 160 gigabyte iPod, then yes, you can afford it. But if your financial house is not in this kind of order, you might want to hold off on that kind of purchase. Maybe set a certain amount aside from each paycheck so you can afford it at a later time. Or maybe reconsider how much storage you really need. All right, my next and last video on this chapter 5 will contain some closing words and some comments about the personal financial struggles that I had back in my 20s, struggles that led me to put this chapter in my book.